Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. This week, Native historian Donovan Sprague is speaking at nearly a dozen events marking the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Greasy Grass. His ancestor, Chief Hump, was one of the key tribal leaders who defeated the 7th Cavalry, resisting the U.S. government's drive to force Plains tribes onto reservations. Today on our show, we'll speak with Sprague and other descendants, including Ernie LaPointe, the great-grandson of Sitting Bull, on the continuing influence of this monumental battle. We're back after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas. The nation's 575 federally recognized tribes are now eligible for conservation grants from the National Park Service. And as KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrasio reports, a new digital tool is designed to help them navigate the bureaucracy.
The Land and Water Conservation Fund has been around since 1964.
It receives about $900 million each year from offshore oil and gas royalties, not taxpayer dollars, to support conservation and outdoor recreation nationwide. And yet I had never heard of the program.
Starlin Rose Miller is from the Little Shell Chippewa tribe of Montana. She's with the nonprofit Wilderness Society, which launched the new online hub.
Tribal governments are so busy. We thought if we could put a hub up, designed in partnership with Indigenous-led orgs, agencies, nonprofits, that it could be helpful.
The fund has aided more than 47,000 projects in nearly every county nationwide. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrasio.
High energy costs are a fact of life in remote, rural Alaska with few easy answers. A brother and sister team from Bethel recently won top honors at an innovation competition hosted from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. As KYUK's Evan Erickson reports, they are committed to being part of the solution.
Fraternal twins Drini and Viosa Palumbi have more in common than the same birthday. So far, their education and career paths have followed side by side. The brother and sister graduated from high school with college credit gained through the ANCEP program and are currently studying mechanical engineering at the University of Alaska Anchorage. The Palumbi twins are busy advancing a prototype of a device that attaches to home boilers and aims to reduce heating costs in cold weather climates.
Essentially, it takes heat that would have been wasted by the boiler and just repurposes it to heat incoming water.
Their Arctic heat recovery system design earned the top prize and $21,000 at the Alaska Innovation Competition hosted by the University of Alaska Fairbanks. The same day, the pair celebrated their 20th birthday.
During the finals of that competition, we still had finals for our semester course, and stresses were high. It was a lot of good news that day.
This summer, the Palumbis are both in Washington, D.C., interning with a wildlife conservation nonprofit. In their off hours, they're plugging away at their prototype.
On my table right in front of me, we have a couple thermocouples and sensors. We're in 2 separate apartments, but we take turns whose room carries all the junk.
Drini says the heat recovery concept is nothing new, but that it's so far been focused on large-scale commercial applications.
I guess a lot of people just don't see a profit margin in developing it for Alaskan citizens, like residents, to use, but we're not really in it for the profit. We're in it because it's clean, it saves oil, it saves money, it saves pollutants from entering the atmosphere. It's just good all around.
Friends and family in Bethel, where fuel prices have recently spiked due to the war in Iran, are eager to be the first to test the device. The Palumbis say it has the potential to save homeowners thousands of dollars per year. They say the money they earned at this year's Arctic Innovation Competition is going directly into making the heat recovery system a reality. The second-generation Albanian Americans credit their mother for pushing them to apply together for the competition.
One of the core values is being very family oriented. So I guess that's always been why we've been gravitated towards doing the same things, because we've always been close.
Both say they could end up specializing in different engineering fields down the road, but for now, they say they're enjoying being a team as long as they can. In Bethel, I'm Evan Erickson.
And I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Skugtash. For more than 40 years, Ramona Farms has revived ancient traditional foods, tepary beans, pinoli, polentas, and more, all from store.ramonafarms.com. Ramona Farms supports this show. Tom Yang.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. For generations, Native families have passed down stories of their relatives who fought in the historic Battle of the Greasy Grass. Jody Rave Spotted Bear, a Native journalist and editor-in-chief of the online news site Buffalo's Fire, traces her lineage to Bears with Horns, a warrior who died on that battlefield. His younger sister was instrumental in keeping his legacy going. Similarly, Lakota historian Donovan Sprague tracks his family ancestry back to the renowned leaders Crazy Horse and Chief Hump. And Ernie LaPointe actively nurtures the legacy of his great-grandfather, Sitting Bull, for future generations. Today on our show, we'll speak with those who trace their lineage to Native leaders and warriors connected to the Battle of Greasy Grass. We also want to hear from listeners today who have a direct connection to the battle. Share your family's history by calling 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE, and you can also comment on our website and social media pages. Joining us now on Zoom from Lead, South Dakota is Ernie LaPointe, great-grandson of Sitting Bull. He is Lakota and a U.S. Army veteran. Ernie, good morning, and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Good morning to you.
Joining us from Rapid City, South Dakota, en route to Montana, is Donovan Sprague. He is a historian, archivist, and a professor at Sheridan College. He is also a descendant of Chief Hump and Crazy Horse, and he is a citizen of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. Donovan, good morning to you as well, and welcome back to the show.
Good morning. I'm Petu Washte.
And joining us from the Greasy Grass battlefield site in southeastern Montana is Jody Rave Spotted Bear. She is the executive director of the Indigenous Media Freedom Alliance and editor-in-chief of Buffalo's Fire. She is Mandan, Hidatsa, and Miniconjou Lakota. Jody, welcome back to Native America Calling. Good morning to you as well.
Yeah, Shana, that's Gosha. Greetings to everyone.
Thank you so much for these warm greetings from our guests. And Jody, the site of the Battle of Greasy Grass is located on the Real Bird Family Ranch there in southeast Montana. You and other members of Buffalo's Fire are attending the commemoration this week. What do you want to convey about this event?
Yes, we have today we have staff members arriving from Washington, D.C., from Bismarck, from Standing Rock, and Alaska, and we have a local team on the ground. And if I had anything to share with people, I would encourage folks to go to buffalosfire.com, and we have a live blog that will be kicking in with reporters on the ground at various events for about the next 3-4 days, I would say. We also have a memorial wall, and we have a recording teepee set up. So we're here to document all of the oral histories that we have been hearing from people over the last, I would say, 8 months since planning really started kicking off for this event.
Jody, for someone who has visited the battlefield many times, can you tell there are a lot more people, a lot more excitement, a lot more energy there this year than in the past?
Oh, yes. This is, I would say, probably the most energy and coordination that has ever occurred on this site for Native peoples, for the Osheti Shakoi, and a lot of other nations are joining in from around the country. The camp today's really the start of the camp day and tomorrow. So, that is what is happening. There's we have an agenda for this entire event on buffalosfire.com. We have stories on there, and there's not been anything like this ever planned. And I can add one more thing that, in the past when we hit these milestones for the commemoration, like 25 years ago, they had a commemoration. And a lot of this activity was happening at the Little Bighorn National Monument, their area on their stages, and a number of Native folks that were a part of that said, we're going to do it different this year. We don't need to be a part of the National Park Service agenda. We're going to stage our own events. So that is when the Reelbird family offered up their land, which is the original encampment site from 150 years ago. And it's exciting. The excitement could be felt from the first planning meeting last summer.
Jody, you say doing it different, and that's a good segue to my next question. I want to know, in your lifetime, the perception of the battle that occurred. Has it changed?
It changed in what way?
In the way it's presented, and the perspectives of all parties that were present and active during that battle.
Oh, yes. One thing that we see happening, and this is from a journalist perspective, is that there is more importance placed on the oral tradition. Of course, that's always had a real solid place within our families, our communities. But because we've had that oral tradition, those stories weren't always documented. And that is one thing that I had noticed just attending the planning meetings as a part of the communications team, is that even though they were supposed to be logistics meetings, there were so many people that stood up and shared their family history. And these aren't recorded in any books, which is where Buffalo's Fire, came up with the idea that there's so many stories I haven't heard or read, and a lot of other people don't know. So we have our teepee set up. We're probably going to do a second one, and recording all the people who have a story to share.
And Jody, you, like our other guests and some of these folks who you describe, have a direct family connection. You're a descendant of Bear with Horns who died during the fighting. Tell us what you know about him and how his story came to be passed down over all these years.
Yes, I have. We have, of course, a lot of people in our family that are proud of our family history. I mean, there's a lot more stories there, but my Aunt Mary Lee Johns in particular is the historian in our family, and she loves to tell these stories. And so she's always talked about Bear with Horns, and then our grandma, Lucy Poor Buffalo, who in her younger days her name was Grows in a Day. And the story that stuck with me most is how of course, you had the big encampment, and it was filled with, families with children, elders, women, and the warriors. And when the 7th Cavalry attacked the camp, my grandmother, Grows in a Day, great-great-grandmother Grows in a Day, was present. And then on the day of the battle, she went to the site with her mother to look for Bear with Horns, and because he hadn't returned. And on that particular day, we know it was a hot day, and the cavalry soldiers' bodies had started to bloat, to expand, and that was the memory she carried as a little girl. She was probably about 7, 8 years old, so old enough to remember, and she described those bodies as looking like big sacks of flour, laying up on the battlefield.
Yeah, geez. It's those types of graphic images, I think, that really stay with people and really underscore what happened on that day 150 years ago. Really, really fascinating to hear you share some of this family history, Jody. Now, the stories that you're collecting, and ultimately you're going to have this digital memorial wall. Tell us a little bit more about what you hope this project will ultimately add up to.
Yeah, so for the memorial wall, as we're doing the family oral history recordings, we'll be having people post on the memorial wall, and it's really important that we remember our family histories and share them and preserve them for future generations, because the people that are here right now, they do know the stories. My family is just one example, and just to show why these stories are still alive, the Battle of Little Bighorn is not that far removed. 150 years might sound like a long time to a younger person, but we have a photo of my dad with his great grandmother, Lucy Poor Buffalo, and that's a close history. And so we want people not only to record their stories, but we want to share these names with people all over the world and remember our relatives who fought and died here to preserve a way of life that was so important to them and that they cherished. I'm here at the main teepee encampment right now, so I'm looking at the Ogallala teepees that have gone up. The Sichongu, or the Rosebud tribe, has set their teepees up. I can see the.
We're going to have to take a short break here, and we'll come back and continue our conversation. In a rare display of bipartisanship, the U.S. Senate approved a landmark affordable housing bill. But Native housing advocates say it neglects specific mention of the population that is disproportionately most affected by the high cost of housing. We'll hear more on the next Native America Calling.
Grand Canyon Conservancy fosters visitor engagement with the landscape through learning, discovery, and stewardship. The Grand Canyon Conservancy Field Institute provides immersive and educational adventures designed in partnership with Grand Canyon National Park, including day hikes for the family, once-in-a-lifetime backpacking trips, and art classes with expert instructors. More at grandcanyon.org. Grand Canyon Conservancy supports this show.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. We are speaking with direct descendants of warriors and leaders of the Battle of Greasy Grass, also known as the Battle of Little Bighorn. We're discussing what their ancestors passed down and why this battle continues to be explored 150 years later. You can join this conversation today with your comments and questions. The number is 1-800-996-2848. Once again, that number is 1-800-996-2848. Join today's discussion on the commemoration of the Battle of Greasy Grass 150 years later. Once again, that number, 1-800-996-2848. One of our guests, Jody Rave Spotted Bear, is on the battlefield site today. And before we bring in our next guest, Ernie LaPointe, I want to give Jody a chance to wrap up. And just, Jody, any other thoughts or comments you want to share with our listeners before we move on to Ernie?
I'd like to say is that all nations are welcome, even though we have a main teepee camp with the allied nations from back on that battlefield day. there's camping sites surrounding the main teepee encampment, and people are sure welcome to come and participate in the many activities that are happening. I was mentioning earlier that the National Park Service has their own agenda, but this year all the allied nations said let's plan this on our own terms, and so there's an entire schedule, and again, that's all available on the buffalosfire.com website. And it feels good to be here. It feels good to see all the teepees coming up. We've been here for about 4 days and watching everything unfold.
It sounds like an absolutely wonderful event, Jody, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with our listeners today. Ernie LaPointe joins us now, great-grandson of Sitting Bull. Ernie, your great-grandfather, beyond the fighting age at the time of the battle, so he wasn't actively engaged in the combat, but why was his leadership at the time so vital? Let's start there for our listeners.
Well, I think mostly he was, as most people identify with what they call leaders of the tribes. He was a spokesperson, a caretaker, and a provider. And his most vital life during that time was he was a sun dancer. And he gave his blood, sweat, and tears in the Sundance arena, and through it he gets visions. He got visions to for the people and for the future. And this is how he was told of the encroachment of the Black Hills in 1874, when they discovered gold here in the Black Hills. And so he did a Sundance in a place called Deer Medicine Rocks in Montana. But he had a vision quest in a place just north of a place called Carterville in Montana. He did a vision. And through there, he was informed of, what the future was coming to. So he did the Sundance, and through the Sundance, he was given a vision also of soldiers falling the camp. And the voice said, I give you these, for they have no ears. But he also told him, tell the people, do not take the spoils. In other words, don't take their clothes, their food, horses, weapons, or nothing. It's just leave them as they lay. And he said that would be the outcome. The outcome for that would be, positive, but didn't say how. But then on the other hand, I can understand the anger the people had against the troops. So, what happened to, they took the clothes and some of them were scalped. There were many things done to them, except for Custer. They left him laying there, and the Cheyenne women, the ones who stuck all these sewing sticks in his ears so he can hear better in the spirit world. And also heard from some elders, from the friends of mine, they said they even stuck a stick up his penis to say that what he did to the Cheyenne women at the Washita in Oklahoma. So these are things, that's never been told anywhere, from history books. Historians always try to keep the events, from telling the truth. So, he was more of an inspirational leader than he was, really a combat thing. When he was younger, he was. So I guess as he got older, he was more of a advisor and like a protector for the people.
Ernie, one of the qualities that I've always been really fascinated by, and I admire very much about great leaders like your great-grandfather Sitting Bull, is that they must have been really good at organizing people. They must have been really effective of that and being able to get people together. So I'm interested in learning more about how Sitting Bull was effective in uniting so many tribes to fight the U.S. government.
Well, actually, after the vision he had at Cartersville, he sent word out, and they said in them days, the word that went out was faster than the internet or telegraph or telephones,
Uh-huh.
He wanted to have a meeting with the people and how they were going to deal with the encroachment of the sacred Black Hills, which was by the Treaty of 1868 was, said it was Lakota. I mean, it belonged to the natives. I mean, he never signed the treaty because he knew they were never going to keep the word. So, but he was told this. So he sent word out to have a meeting, see how they were going to deal with the government's encroaching of the Black Hills. And that's how people came to meet with him. And eventually the place near the Dead Medicine Rocks, all the horses were eating up all the grass and there was hardly no food. So they sent scouts up. And the ones from the west came back and said there was a large herd of antelope around the Greasy Grass. So they moved over there. And that's where the hunts had, and they were feasting on these antelope. And when they weren't expecting Custer to show up, it was just they were just going to have a meeting there and do a planning on how to deal with the government, and that's how he got the people together. And the historians, I read Utley's book. He said they came as nations. They didn't, because a lot of them were still at the agencies. They just, some of them broke away. And some of them didn't go to the agencies. They were kind of like, they call them hostiles, the white man did. So, but then, they heard the news, so they came to the Little Bighorn to join up with people. And they weren't camped like, Oglalas, Minikojus, Hunkpapas, and all this. I think the bigger group was the Hunkpapas, because there was the southern end. And there was his followers, was with him. But the rest of them were just scattered. The Cheyennes, the Arapahoes, they all showed up and they just camped along the Little Bighorn, on the west side of the river. And that's how they would come together, and they were going to, they kept showing up every day. I had a friend of mine tell me his grandfather's name was Knife Chief. He was arriving on the 26th of June, when the battle was still going on, parts of it. And when he was arriving with his group of a couple of people, they were kind of joining. And there was others showing up later because, they didn't come right at the moment. So it was a heck of a deal there, I guess, and then all the things that the historians say, they want to hear the truth. So you tell them the truth, they don't want to hear it.
That's why we have you on our show today, Ernie. We've got a couple of callers on the line. I'm going to take them both. First up is Tepeziwin Tolman, who is listening online in Washington, D.C. Hello, you are on the air.
Hi, I'm in Pullman, Washington, on the West Coast, actually.
Oh, my bad. Wrong coast. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. I love your show, and thank you to the elder there sharing for our people to, and for all people to be able to hear our people's history from our own words, and that's really important. And I'm grateful that our people are on that journey to get the truth out in our own words about our own families. And that's why I wanted to share today. I'm descendant of a woman named Rocky Butte. She was also known as Cowboy. Throughout her lifetime, her name was Ianjewita, and she was a Dakota woman that survived what's called the massacre at Whitestone Hill in modern-day Calm, North Dakota in 1863. And then following a couple, decades later, she was at the Little Bighorn. She was at Greasy Grass, and she was known to be, and she's remembered as being the only woman in the surround. And the surround is what our Lakota Dakota people called the circle of horses of the men warriors who were circling on what's known as Custer's Last Stand Hill. And it was that last surviving contingent of the 7th Cavalry. And she was known to be the only woman on horseback and remembered. And she has 4 living great-grandchildren currently, and they are my father, Eugene Pepper Young, and my 3 aunts, his 3 little sisters, Sharon, Debbie, and Betty Jean. and they all live in the community of Long Soldier in Fort Yates, North Dakota. And we've carried that history forward, and we really honor and are really grateful to be her grandchildren. One thing that I wanted to share with the people is how history gets it wrong. There's a caption on her pictures in the North Dakota Historical Society, and it says, Rocky Butte, or Cowboy, was rumored to be a man. She wore men's riding pants underneath her dress. And I believe that was because of the Western American culture, the colonial culture, that had a hard time grasping and understanding that our women could join in battle. And for me, as a mother, and I think those mothers and parents and relatives who have loved ones that they watch over, that if an army was coming to kill you, to take your home, and to kill your family and kill your children, I don't believe that it's far-fetched that our women stood up and fought alongside with our men. And because she was a survivor already of the Whitestone Hill, people call it a battle, but it was also a massacre. She had already survived that as a young woman, and so now, fast forward 20 years, she decided to fight, and she got on her horse and she fought with the men, and she's remembered on Standing Rock and by our large family that lives everywhere now as the only woman in the surround who rode on horseback with the men.
That is one fascinating, amazing story. I'm so glad you called in today from Pullman, Washington, to share that family history with our listeners. Thank you again. Let's go now to Regina, who is listening in Pine Ridge, South Dakota on Keeley Radio. Good morning, Regina. You're on the air now.
Good morning. Thank you. My great-grandfather was close to Red Cloud, Mahpialuta. He was a chief at the time of Little Bighorn. And it was Sitting Bull who had a dream that the soldiers were coming. Now, this is after they signed the treaty and wanted to be sovereign. And the United States wanted peace with the treaty, on the treaty. So that's what, so our people didn't expect anything, because the United States said they wanted no more wars between our country and their country. So they lived in peace. And then 8 years later, here comes the cavalry. But Sitting Bull had a dream that they were coming. So the soldiers are coming. They're going to kill all our men, women, children, even the dogs and their horses. And so the men went out, and Mahpialuta sent scouts out to the different reservations. There are different tribes that were under our protection, and they brought their soldiers and got ready for the soldiers to come in. And Custer, from history, he violated his command orders, and he came in with Benteen and Reno, and Crook didn't commit his unit, because when he looked at it, the headmen from all the different tribes that brought soldiers, that brought the warriors, were standing on a hill with their I can't remember what they call them. I'm losing a lot of words here. But anyway, whenever one went up, whoever was under that went into battle. So it was well strategized, and that strategized was by Red Claw, Mahpialuta. And Crook watched it. He didn't commit his unit, but watched what happened. And there was already a society of women warriors, who also went with the men. And they called them brave-hearted women, Chante Ohitika. And there was another one called Gatela. And these Gatela go into the battlefield or whatever and strip them down or whatever they did. But after Little Bighorn, and before that, they built decoy tents and so forth, and the Two-Spirit people, you call them Two-Spirit now, they were there walking around, stirring the pot, so the soldiers thought the people, they were going to surprise them.
Uh-huh.
And went in with Benton Reno. He wanted to be the hero. He wanted to be a president of the United States. And they said he was dressed exactly like his soldiers that went in, but our people recognized him anyway. They wanted him alive. And so after the battle, the former speaker here actually said, yeah, he wasn't stripped, because everybody was saying, oh yeah, the people
okay,
what do you call it? Anyway, what he did was he actually committed suicide. So our people don't touch people who commit suicide. They don't address them or anything.
We're getting a really good history lesson here today on Native America Calling, folks, where we have callers joining the conversation as well as our guests. We just heard from Regina in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, a Keeley listener. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and we will continue our conversation with our guest today. We have Ernie LaPointe on the line, and we also have yet to hear from Donovan Sprague, who joins us as well. So stay with us. We'll be right back and continue this conversation.
Support from Davis Keelan Law Firm, a New Mexico firm standing with Native families suffering catastrophic loss. When tragedy strikes Indian country, Davis Keelan fights to restore stability, dignity, and justice, bringing a voice to Native families and communities for 20 years. More information, daviskeelan.com.
Kaufman & Associates has over 35 years of experience serving Indian country, supporting growth, transformation, and sustainability of tribal programs. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
You're listening to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and we're speaking today with descendants of those who fought at the Battle of Greasy Grass. And as a reminder, you can listen to this show and all past shows on our website, nativeamericacalling.com, and all major podcast platforms. One of our guests today, Ernie LaPointe, is the great-grandson of Sitting Bull. And Ernie, we had a couple of callers earlier, and they talked about women warriors, brave-hearted women, as they are described. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role of women warriors there at Greasy Grass and maybe some other notable battles and events there in Lakota history?
Well, I don't really have much information about the women warriors, but I remember my granduncles. They were the ones that was telling us what they seen, what they experienced at the Little Bighorn. And I was probably about 5 years old. We were living at home on the res when they used to come and visit. We had one of our granduncles stayed with us. His name was Refused at them, but while Buffalo Bill Cody gave him a title, John Sitting Bull. He wasn't Sitting Bull's son; he was a stepson, but he gave him that name. And his half brother was Little Soldier, and they had a friend, Dewey Beard. He used to all come to our little cabin, and my mother would put up a shade for him, and they'd sit out there, and she'd make them coffee and stuff, and she'd take it out to them. They never sat in chairs. They had these little bamboo-looking backstops, like a back of a chair, and they'd sit on the ground. And they were in their 80s and 90s. They could jump up and walk around. And it's kind of hard to do that anymore with my age, but I seen them guys do that, and one of them was a deaf mute, so they talked with hand signals, and my mother knew how to do that, and she would listen to them, talk to them, while they were talking to each other. And then at night, she would get us together in the house, and she would lay down a quilt on the floor, and she would tell us what they said. And they spoke mostly about the Little Bighorn battle that they experienced. And one of the things, this is a story that they asked me to talk about, my experience, what I know at at the Little Bighorn Visitor Center one time, and I told this story, and since then I never was invited back. So I guess they didn't want me to. The park rangers didn't want to say that because they were young boys then. They were about 16, 17 years old, and they were up on the northern end of the camp. They had a big corral kind of built with their leather robes. I mean, there's sinew ropes, and they had all these horses in there. They had more horses than people. It seemed like, he said, because a lot of the people that came had 2, 3 horses, maybe 4, some of them. And they were put up there to make sure that the horses were inside of this corral thing. And then they heard this popping to the south, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. At that time, Reno was attacking the Hunkpapa village in the southern end. And while they were, trying to figure out if they should leave and get the horse and go join the fight, then all of a sudden somebody yelled, and looked to the east, and right there in a deep ravine, they call it, there was a column of soldiers coming up, 4 abreast. And they were getting close to the eastern edge of the Little Bighorn River. So they had little single shot rifles, and they were shooting at them, and all of a sudden somebody from those southern, south of them was firing a rifle at them, one of them Winchester repeaters. And they shot 2 of them off the horse. And one of them they left, but they grabbed the second one, they put him on a horse. They didn't know who the soldiers were because it was hot, and they didn't know what they looked like. And he said they turned around, and the route happened. They were trying to get on top of the hill. And it seemed like a moment, and there was warriors coming all around sides, and the battle, there was a fight there. And I was telling this story too, Al, that when we were doing the Indian Memorial to the group of all the tribes that were there at having a meeting, and I told them about this. This is a story that I knew, that my granduncles told. And there was a Cheyenne elder there. His name was Donald Many Bad Horses. And he told me, he says, "You know that story?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I that's all I know. And he says, "Well," he says, "we know the story too." He said, "There was a girl," he said, had a Winchester rifle that shot them off their horses. And they found out later that one of the guy that left laying on the thing was Indian Scout. I think it was Brugier or something like that was his name. And the other one was, they figured it was Custer. He was shot in the chest. She shot him in the chest, and he was still alive though, I guess. And they didn't want to hear that because they didn't want to hear the fact that it was a girl who shot Custer off his horse.
Okay.
So, this is one of the stories that they talked about. And also, Little Soldier said he watched the soldier get off his horse, take his sidearm and kill the horse, use it as a barrier, And he said, this man knew he wasn't going to see the sunset. He said he killed the only thing that brought him there. He said if they would have beat us, he said, how was he going to leave? He said he killed the thing that brought him to this place. So,
Ernie, I've seen those photographs of, they shot the horses to use as barriers. And I know in that big mass grave there at what they call Last Stand Hill, there's a lot of horses that are buried in there among the bodies as well. That's noted on that big giant memorial there. Donovan Sprague is a historian, archivist, and professor at Sheridan College. He's also a descendant of Chief Hump and Crazy Horse. He joins us now en route to Montana. And Donovan, I want to ask you about your relatives, Chief Hump and Crazy Horse. Can you briefly describe their roles in the battle?
Well, yes, both of them, Hump and Crazy Horse, were headmen, leaders. There are some accounts documented and also oral history that Hump actually had the largest number of warriors under him at the battle, and they fought closely together. Usually knew about where each other was, and then also several other family members were part of that, including 2 of Hump's brothers, Little Crow and Iron Thunder. So we had a number of our family were there. And I also wanted to mention too, that the riders, that's so awesome that the riders are coming in. But like when Ernie said, the people who had not signed treaties, which included Hump and Crazy Horse, they never signed the treaty 1868. So they were labeled the hostiles, and so they were out here. It wasn't like, a lot of people were coming from the agencies to join in this effort, this warfare, but they were already out here. So they were kind of like right in the trenches already, because they had their camps were up and down the Tongue River from about Miles City down Montana down to Dayton, and then the Powder River area, and they had also been defending the people and warfare on the Bozeman Trail after Sand Creek in 1854, in a series of events that went right up the trail, including Fetterman fight, Wagon Box fight, and then the Rosebud, which we just had the 150th of last week. And then there's also the father Hump and the son Hump. So I have all of my history and story documented in a forthcoming book. So it's not like I have to go and research it. I've done that for 25 years, and it's in there. But a lot of people had the father of Hump fighting at Little Bighorn, but my work is through winter counts, and so you look at all of our winter counts of important event of the year drawn on a hide, recorded like that, and you see where Hump, the father, was killed in 1870, and a well-known battle with the Shoshone. Crazy Horse was there. It's in a lot of the books, but yet some of the historians, non-Indian historians, bring him back to fight at Little Bighorn. But that was his son. He was 26 years old. So I kind of have to read through the lines on some of that. But my name is Chunkahu Wakanti is my Lakota name, and that translates to Buffalo Hump. So that's the original name, and then they said, what is that word? And that's the hump on the buffalo. And I think it was probably General Miles when Hump was at Tongue River Cantonment, and he asked the same question, and after that they was calling him Chief Hump from Miles.
All right. Donovan, I want to ask you more about some of the presentations and speeches that you've been giving with regard to the 150th anniversary. But before we do that, I want to take one more caller. This is Jen, who is listening online in East Texas. Hello, Jen. Thank you so much for calling. If you could keep your comments to within a minute or two, because we're running low on time.
Well, thank you so much. I am just, my heart is just so big right now hearing all of these descendants, and I'm just loving all the stories, and I appreciate each one of these people and the fact that you have afforded us this, and I'm just so grateful this program today, and I'll be re-listening to it a lot because it's just so beautiful, and thank you all so much.
Thank you for calling in, Jen, and I'm grateful to our guests and callers, too, for making this such a riveting conversation. Donovan, let's talk more about the presentations and speeches that you're giving. You're also on a commemoration planning committee, and you've traveled all through different Native communities and non-Native communities alike throughout the Great Plains. How are you reflecting on this battle and what we're talking about today with the upcoming 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence?
Well, yeah, I've done a number of presentations already since about April on the 150th, but it's really a great celebration for the tribes. It's the most important, battle in our history and event of the year. And so I also look at the other side. Like last week, I was with the Little Bighorn Associates with tours. We had 3 passenger buses full of people with tours into the Greasy Grass. But for them, they look at a marker or something, from their family, and it's more of a reflection, And so you can understand, it means different things to different people depending on what side you were on, and also the same way with the accounts. It's very many accounts from whatever lens, wherever that person was, just like the women that were mentioned, that the heroism that was shown in riding horseback in the battle, and a lot of people don't realize that, and you can get these warrior accounts, and they were in that area, and they'll say, yes, I seen her riding, she came by here, and they'll add a little bit more, to that story. But just a great celebration, and I had the privilege of being a speaker at the 125th anniversary, and it doesn't seem like 25 years ago. But I'm speaking with the National Monument there, but I'm also speaking for with the tribes, and that's something I should mention also. The Real Bird property was mentioned as tribal land on the battlefield, but a lot of people don't realize that our tribe, Cheyenne River, and I'm Minikoju and Cheyenne, because all of our hitmen, warriors, married into the Cheyenne tribe. But we have 200 acres on the south end at Reno Creek. And so I've given a presentation there in the past when they first purchased that land to several of the chairmen were there. And so I'll be giving another presentation down there on the day of, on June 25th. And so that presentation will flow around the things that happened down there, with Reno Creek and that portion of the battle.
Thank you, Donovan. We have time for one more question. And Ernie LaPointe, I want to ask you this because you and a descendant of George Armstrong Custer were recently profiled in a New York Times article. And I know you've had some brief encounters with the Custer family over the years. What's your experience with them?
Yeah, well, sometime back in 2006, I was invited to the Monroe, Michigan to speak at that's Custer's wife's hometown. And the guy who invited me was Steve Alexander. He's a Custer reenactor. And all the Kolas over here said, "You're going?" And I said, "Yeah, I ain't got nothing to fear." So I went there, and they had this little museum there, and Custer memorabilia stuff. And they had more people there than the little thing could hold. They had like 50 chairs, so they moved it to the movie theater, and it filled it up. And I couldn't believe that all these people who lived in Custer's hometown there came to see me, and I did a book signing with them, and they treated me honorably, So I said, it's, pretty cool. And then I was giving a talk after the memorial thing, theater thing. And there was somebody asked me a question. They said that they heard that Custer had a child with the Cheyenne women. And before I could answer it, somebody in the back room yelled out. He said, "Heck no." And he said he was a relative of Custer. And so the person said, "Well, why not?" And he says, he couldn't have any children. He said, because he rode a horse. And I said, there shouldn't be any children, because everybody rode horses back then.
Okay. All righty. We're going to have to wrap up our show today. Wish we had more time, but we only have an hour for every one of our episodes of Native America Calling. Big thanks, though, to our guests today, Ernie LaPointe, Donovan Sprague, Jody, Rave, Spotted Bear, and the callers who joined our conversation today as well. And don't forget, please, join us again tomorrow when we will take a look at efforts to address affordable housing for Native Americans. I'm Sean Spruce. Enjoy the rest of your day.
tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate healing.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.